Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. So, I'm going to talk about the science of happiness and joy today, and why joy is not an accident. Now, what's brought me to discuss this today is a great sense of contentment and happiness that I felt this morning. And it was an odd thing that crept up on me. I wasn't expecting it. I'd had a really busy week. I'd been flying for work. I had been delivering quite a lot of quite stressful presentations. I had been teaching and I had really overstretched myself. And I'm someone who loves work. I was really feeling under the pump this week. And as part of my work, I was away from home over the last sort of 3 days. And I returned home yesterday and I had a very lovely evening. I curled up on the sofa with my son and watched a movie. And I had an early bed. And I remember going into bed, my head on the pillow and thinking, gosh, I just love being home. And then I woke this morning, the sun was shining. I went out and I bought some flowers for the house. And I came back and I had that great sense of joy. Nothing brilliant had happened to me, but I had this wonderful sense of joy. So I'm going to ask you to start, if it's safe to do so, to close your eyes and think of a recent happy moment in your life. Now, it might be a moment of connection, a rush of laughter, a big belly laugh, a feeling of being fully alive. You might be thinking of a person that made you feel this, a child or a parent or a wonderful friend. Take that moment and just reflect on how it felt. Because happiness is not a mystery. It's not a bolt of lightning that we wait and it happens to us. But the science of happiness tells us a different story. That joy is a skill set and it's a system. It's a set of behaviours entwined with your environment that we can actually deliberately cultivate to be more and more a part of our life. So I want to show you the science today, the neuroscience, the psychology, the cross-cultural data, and show you how small daily shifts can create a more joyful life. And that joy isn't nice. It's not this nice thing. It isn't just this fluffy sense of niceness. It is truly therapeutic. And that's where the real impact happens. So I want to start with one of the most fascinating pieces of research I've seen of late. And this is Spencer Late and his colleagues in 2023. And they did a study on joviality. They saw it as a cluster of emotions: joy, excitement, and enthusiasm. There was a large cognitive behavioural therapy trial that found something very remarkable. Patients who increased their level of joviality recovered faster from anxiety and depression. Now, most therapies actually focus on reducing negative emotion, reducing fear, reducing sadness, distress. But these researchers showed that increasing our positive emotions had its own independent, measurable power. So even when the negative emotions didn't change much and they were still popping up, if a patient's joviality was tapped into, their symptoms went down. So their negative symptoms went down. And it's not because joy was fluff. Joy isn't fluff. It's not optional. But if we tap into it, we can use it as medicine and a real lifestyle intervention for our mood. Now, not only that, people who were in these research articles, when these people were more severely anxious at the start of the study, when we increased their joviality, they actually got better quicker and they could tap into their joy quicker. And it was as though the system when fully supported, will naturally tilt towards recovery once you reintroduce this joviality into your life. So the key here is that our brains are built to have both suffering and joy. So if we can, rather than worrying about stifling the suffering, we acknowledge it. If we can amplify the joy, we can respond and recover from the suffering easier. So your brain, from a neuroscience perspective, needs a symphony for happiness to happen. Alexander and his colleagues in 2021 did a review and mapped out the neurophysiology of positive emotions, from neurotransmitters to brain networks to social behaviours, and found 4 key systems that give happiness its shape. Dopamine, that motivation and wanting hormone, it creates that anticipation, that curiosity, engagement. It is central to the reward system, and it influences both, importantly, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, something we're going to keep on touching on. So dopamine modulates the sympathetic activity, particularly in the context of reward and anticipation and motivation. Now, our opioids system is our liking and our contentment. And these circuits generate a warm, satisfied feeling, a sense of contentment, and it's good. Now, whilst we know about lots of very toxic and addictive exogenous external opiates, our endogenous, our own built-in opioids, such as endorphins, can really be harnessed and involved in that experience of pleasure and contentment and joy. So they modulate a sense of joy and contentment that we can really touch into and, really importantly, use as one of our systems for joy. So that endogenous, that inbuilt opioid, that is something that we can use again and again to promote relaxation and reduce stress. And in doing so, we can really impart an influence on our heart rate and something called the vagal tone. Now, the vagal nerve, or the vagus nerve, is a big wandering nerve in our body that is really important for our sense of relaxation and for reducing stress. So opioids are really important, and if we can really touch into them and think about how we can access them, naturally we can really help our relaxation and our stress. And the most important of these is our endorphins, of course. Now, we know that if you go for a run, that sense of endorphins, that sense of wellness can sit with us all day. So when you next exercise and you get a really great start to your day as a result, I want you to reflect on that sense of contentment, that pleasure. That is your opioid circuits, and that is your natural endorphins working to increase your vagal tone, thereby reducing stress responses, and bringing down your heart rate. Now, thirdly, I want to touch on oxytocin. So this is our connection and trust hormone. It strengthens social bonds. It's what we rely on as mothers of newborns to sort of make that connection with your baby. You get a big rush of this oxytocin, this love hormone, when you meet your baby. It reduces fear, and it literally makes other people seem more rewarding to us. It's a neuropeptide crucial for social bonding and love, and it promotes a sense of calm and engagement. So this is where our social connectedness can really be rewarding, and it's part of that system of happiness. Now, I do want to lean a little bit into serotonin. So serotonin plays a role in our mood regulation, hence why we use serotonin reuptake inhibitors for depression and anxiety. Now, serotonin can influence both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. So, for instance, serotonin can lead to an increased vagal drive for the cardiac function, resulting in a lower blood pressure and heart rate. So, having higher levels of serotonin can help with that essence of stress, anxiety. But I do want to touch on the fact that our use of things like SSRIs, whilst they can be useful in very significant anxiety and depression, they are actually in themselves can be quite blunting, giving us not just a regulation, but a constant flatness. So serotonin on its own, it's naturally occurring, really useful for mood regulation. When we try to harness it through pharmacology, again, can be really useful for serious mental health issues. But our reliance on SSRIs perhaps negates to acknowledge that we're also flattening our effect and flattening our ability to enjoy great joy and enthusiasm and heightened states of wellness. It's something that I'm getting increasingly passionate about in my own practice. I'm very careful about prescribing these medications. They have a place, but they're not the answer to everything. And again, having that natural serotonin is really useful. Always speak to your doctor if you're thinking about changing up medications like SSRIs, antidepressants. It's really important you do it with a doctor because abrupt withdrawal can be quite toxic and awful on your system. So all of these neurotransmitters, and not forgetting things like our norepinephrine, which works on our sympathetic nervous system for our fight and flight response, all of these neurotransmitters are part of the great tapestry that interacts with our autonomic nervous system to modulate that physiological state that corresponds to emotional and cognitive experiences. Now, the balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic activity is crucial for maintaining that homeostasis, that balance. So it's good that we have ups and downs, and that's what we need. And we need to balance them from both our external environmental stresses and stimuli and our internal stresses and stimuli. So I do just want to mention what's called the prefrontal networks, in particular the prefrontal cortex. This plays a critical role in execution of higher functions. So it's included in working memory, attention, processing, and emotional regulation. It's our higher functioning to help us interact with the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and to modulate these functions. So to think about how this higher functioning works, I'll take dopamine. So dopamine in the prefrontal cortex is essential for cognitive processes such as attention and working memory. So when you have optimal levels of dopamine, when they work, it helps to reduce the noise and enhance signaling and give you clarity, thereby improving your cognitive function. Serotonin influences mood and emotional regulations, as we've said. So serotonin in the prefrontal cortex is linked to our mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. So when we have dysregulation of serotonin, we have greater depression and anxiety. It acts on various serotonin receptors to modulate cognitive flexibility and emotional responses. Again, really ancient neuroendocrine circuits here. And then looking at the norepinephrine, this enhances our prefrontal cortex. It does this by acting on receptors which strengthen network connectivity and improve working memory and attention. So excessive norepinephrine, often excessive stress, where we feel that we are constantly under the pump, can impair that prefrontal cortex functioning by overstimulating the receptors. And that actually gives us this cognitive deficit. So the prefrontal cortex influences the autonomic nervous system through a regulatory control over the parasympathetic and the sympathetic systems. Now, it modulates these responses by integrating cognitive and emotional information. And we do that through our circuitry and through our, again, ancient neuroendocrine systems. So with the sympathetic nervous system, the prefrontal cortex can enhance that sympathetic activity during stress or arousal, giving us increased heart rate and blood pressure, which is brilliant for that fight or flight. And we need that through all the evolutionary pathways to get us to where we are today so that we respond to dangers. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system, the prefrontal cortex also promotes parasympathetic activity when needed. This will facilitate relaxation and recovery. So you can see how the parasympathetic and the sympathetic need to be balanced. Now, we manage this balance and we manage to promote the parasympathetic activity by inhibiting excessive sympathetic output. And we do this by enhancing vagal tone. And interestingly, this is brilliantly done by breath work. And it can be measured through something called our heart rate variability, which you'll have heard about. So knowing that we can have variability, knowing that we can enhance our relaxation through things like exercise and breath work, we can then use these interactions between dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine to really regulate our cognitive functions and our activity in the parasympathetic and the sympathetic systems. Now, that's a lot to process. So here's the important bit. Positive emotions are not static, and they're not static personality traits. Sure, we can see people who are very positive, but these are trainable. People like that have become like that through leaning on their positive emotions and actually building their trainable neural states. So we respond to habits, we respond to environments and relationships, and even moment-to-moment attention. You know yourself when someone can lift your spirit and fill your cup. You know when someone can really drain you as well. So we respond to habits, environments, relationships, and moments. So practices like surrounding yourself with positive people can really make a difference to the type of personality traits that you are sort of tapping into. Things like meditation and actually practicing gratitude. And I know it sounds a little bit forced, and it's not about forcing it. It's about taking the time to actually enjoy a moment, actually being playful in our lives, taking a moment to enjoy an interaction with someone else, whether that's a game of bananagrams or whether that's having a bit of a joke and a laugh and doing something creative, having play in your life, going to a daft pottery class with someone for a laugh, doing an art class with someone, going to creative writing classes, but also things like deep social connections. So joining communities and volunteering, they will literally rewire the brain towards a greater positive effect. So happiness is not a gift or luck. It really is about using these really ancient neuroendocrine pathways for building traits that will benefit you. So if we look at lessons that we learned during the pandemic, joy is a human strength, but it's one that you've got to work on. So Robbins and colleagues looked in 2021 that during the pandemic, something striking happened to what is our humanistic work. Some people, even amid moderate isolation and fear could still manage a form of joy. They weren't excited or cheerful, but had a deep capacity to stay connected to what mattered. And what Robbins described was that this joy that people still maintained despite the fear and the isolation, it wasn't denial, it wasn't a forced positivity, it wasn't a forced happiness or happiness as a performance, but it was a resilient orientation to life. So this form of joy included having meaning. So you still had a purpose. So people who still worked online and had social connections during the pandemic, they fared better. But also a form of joy that included authenticity. So it's a real joy. So it's having that moment when you were on Zoom speaking to a friend and how are you doing and how's things for you? And is everything going okay? And oh my gosh, let me tell you something funny happened. That authentic form of joy is there and was a trait to be built on and a strength to work on. There was an element of acceptance where people said, well, it will be, will be. What will be, will be. There's some things I can't change and this lockdown I can't change, but I can change how I respond to it. And being open to the moment and the adaptation that you had to do was important. And it's very similar to well-being as described by Aristotle, a really ancient but enduring philosopher. Living in alignment with values and purpose matches our natural neurobiological notion that positive affect emerges when we feel safe, connected, and engaged. So, to live a joyful life means that we need to feel authentic, we need to have meaning, and we need to have connection. Because these things make us feel safe, they make us engaged and connected and useful. So the joyful life, as Robin calls it was this insightful aspect where joy is not the absence of suffering, but it is the continuation and presence of engagement. And we all know people who have retired and lost a sense of purpose. And we all know people who have retired and gotten busier and really engaged with volunteering and friendship groups. And we know which one thrives. So again, we can't remove or avoid all suffering or misery or unhappiness. But what we can do is be reliant on a presence of mind where we are engaged, we are useful, and we lean into these traits of mindfulness and gratitude. And it's through doing these things that we can activate these ancient neuroendocrine pathways. And again, it's the exercise, the endorphins, the breath work we do that activates our vagal nerve and our parasympathetic nervous system to give us a sense of relaxation and contentment. It is those attributes that we have to tap into. So what makes humans happy throughout the world? Because I'm looking at ancient neurobiology and I'm looking at our current status quo in a working world that's been hit by pandemics and so forth. If joy improves mental health now in our world, and it's woven through our ancient neurobiology, what does happiness look like in cultures that have different impacts? People who don't work this crazy sort of 12-hour days, office lifestyle and find themselves with too many tabs open and too much stress. The enormous systematic review done by Singh and colleagues in 2023 covered 155 studies from 100 countries. And they found that determinants of happiness fall into 3 universal categories: health, hope, harmony. Now, health, it's not just our physical health, but of course it's that emotional and mental health that we keep talking about. And that is best maintained through resilience, mindfulness, emotional stability, positive coping, physical activity, sleep. Now, these talk a lot to what I think about as our pillars of lifestyle medicine. So looking after our stress, looking after our exercise, looking after sleep. Those are 3 big pillars, aren't they? Then let's look at hope. So hope includes having a goal, but having a real purpose. And again, it's that engagement. Purpose is engagement and connectivity. It's having optimism and doing meaningful work. If your job is aligned with your values and it feels meaningful to you, your sense of hope and your sense of purpose is so much strengthened for that. And that is part of the big picture of what makes you happy. We thrive when the future feels possible for us. There's optimism, there are goals, there are positive things happening in the not too distant future. And harmony. And this is probably the most powerful determinant because I've talked about the symphony of what makes us happy. And I've talked about the balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic circuits and how everything comes down to harmony. The most powerful determinants of our harmony, and they are intertwined with our ancient neuroendocrine circuits too. It is our strong social connections, community, our identity, and it's alignment with values. Values are so important. And many of us skirt through life just reacting to the people and the situations we're in and not actually stopping to really pressure and power and purpose in our values. Now, these come with a sense of belonging. It can be spirituality. It can be faith. It can be a sense of belonging with nature, with community. It doesn't have to be religious belonging or religious spirituality. It's your sense of self. And all of these cultures that Singh looked at expressed this idea slightly differently, but all pointed to the same truth. Happiness is less about what we have and more about how we relate to ourselves, to others, and to the world. So happiness, less about what we have and more about how we relate to both ourselves through our values, to others through connection, and to the world through spirituality and alignment. Now, I want to then talk about how do we build a joyful life. There's a lot of big information bombs throughout what I've spoken for the last half hour. But to build a joyful life brings these bodies of research that we've mentioned towards a blueprint for living. I want us to practice that positive affect, deliberately reflect and enjoy moments that matter. Notice a pleasant sensation. Savor a good moment. Do enjoyable activities. Laugh more. Put music on and have a sense of elation. I want you to find something that is an element of playfulness. Whether that is dancing with friends, whether that is going to an art class or a yoga class, whether that is having a bit of foolishness in your day that is enjoyable. These will boost your jovial experience and it'll improve your mental health by a byproduct. Number 2, invest in relationships. Connection is the most reliable happiness intervention we can do. Biologically and cross-culturally, connection is important, even for introverts. The Harvard longitudinal study told us that good relationships give us happiness and longevity and health. It does mean that we have to reflect on relationships that are not perhaps good for us, but it means that we need to really cultivate those relationships that are positive. and fix the ones that need fixing and put energy and effort into making these relationships healthy and happy. If you have been neglectful of your marriage or your relationship with your partner or your family or your children or your parents, take ownership of that. Love is a doing word. You've got to do it. You've got to really give love to have love. You've got to reflect when you know that you haven't been loving in your interactions, and you've got to look at that connection to see how you can improve upon it. With connections, I always say to my family, the answer is more love. If you're struggling with a relationship, the answer is more love. Unless, of course, that relationship is really bad for you. And then perhaps sometimes the answer is to step away from it. And that is giving yourself more love. So fundamentally, the answer to connection is more love. Number 3, build harmony in your environment. Nature, community, habits, ritual, culture, small daily habits. You know how I feel about habits. Habits need to be easy, reproducible. They need to be conditioned into your life through repetition. Harmony comes when habits are easy. So lean into your community, build your rituals, encompass your culture, your values into your harmony. I identify as someone who exercises because I enjoy the endorphins. I do that outside in nature because I get a bigger bang for my energy buck by embracing nature, endorphins, and getting those habits into my environment, and it gives me harmony. Number 4, craft hope. Set goals, make commitments, celebrate progress, and find real values and meanings in the work that you do. If your work is a drudge, and some work is, find an aspect of your work where you can give someone else a little bit of joy. And I look at that in my own work as a general practitioner. I will often have heavy workloads where I'm dealing with difficult socioeconomic problems that my patients bring to me. And I could get really bogged down and burnt out with them. Or I can lean into it and say, do you know what? I'm going to give this person another extra 10 minutes of my time because they need it and they will have a sense of well-being from my giving them that. In reward for that, I get a sense of accomplishment and it aligns with my values. The reason I do medicine is because I want to feel as if I make a difference, not just in helping people get better from illnesses and sicknesses, but actually because my interactions with people are themselves therapeutic. And that means a lot to me. And that's where I craft hope through my work, where I do valued-driven work. Number 5, train your brain. Meditation, gratitude, reflection, being compassionate. These actions reshape our neural networks that support positivity. This is the science. It's not fluffy and woolly to meditate, to exercise gratitude, or to reflect and to live compassionately. It is actually scientifically proven now to support these massively ancient neuroendocrine networks and support positivity. Train your brain. Meditate, exercise gratitude, reflect on good experiences, and show yourself and others great compassion and reshape your neural networks. Number 6, really allow joy to coexist with difficulty. I kid you not. Joy is only really something that we can enjoy and experience if we have ups and downs, if we have difficulty, if we can really sense when things are hard, we will really sense when things are joyous. Joy and happiness is not a shield from suffering. It's a companion, and it gives us resilience to put up with hard times. So if you can laugh in a difficult situation, you are treating yourself. You are using joy as medicine. If you can be resilient in times of hardship, if you can really enjoy a friendship, if you can get comfort from another human being during a time of difficulty, it is because you are letting joy coexist with difficulty. Look, the science is really clear. Happiness is not a luxury that is afforded to a few. It is not in itself a personality trait. It is, however, a biological capacity, a psychological skill, and a cultural practice. So joy heals the mind, it rewires the brain, it strengthens communities, and it builds resilience. It is one of the most powerful therapeutic forces that we can have. And it's available to all of us in small choices and repeated practice. So the next time that you notice a spark of joy, a burst of laughter, a moment of connection, a time when you walk away from having spent a 20-minute walk with a good friend or done a run with a running group, have a deep breath of contentment. Don't dismiss it. That tiny moment is your medicine. That tiny moment is your brain learning how to be happy, and it's shaping your neural networks. Now, your job, your only job, is to keep on choosing and repeating those processes.